Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The bar hummed with energy, a tapestry of laughter and animated conversations, the kind that thrived in the aftermath of success. Ethan leaned against the polished wooden bar, the warmth of the amber whiskey in his glass matching the glow of camaraderie around him. His team had pulled off the impossible, and tonight was a celebration of their hard work. He raised his glass, joining a group of colleagues in a toast. To us. To our project. Ethan declared, feeling a swell of pride as the clinking of glasses resonated like a victorious anthem. Amidst the revelry, his gaze drifted to Chris, his boss, who sat at a table a few feet away. Chris was the kind of guy who thrived in the spotlight, always a step ahead in the corporate game but often crossing lines for a laugh. Tonight, though, he seemed particularly rowdy, leaning back in his chair, a half-empty bottle of tequila at his side. "Can you believe it? We actually did it!" Chris exclaimed, laughter spilling from his lips, drawing attention from nearby tables. The people around him laughed, and Ethan initially dismissed it as harmless banter, until he caught a snippet of what followed. "But you know what would make this night even better?" Chris continued, his voice growing louder. "I've been thinking about sleeping with Ethan's wife, Laura. She's something else." Ethan's heart sank, the sound of Chris's drunken words slicing through the lively atmosphere like a knife. He felt a rush of heat flood his face, a mix of disbelief and fury igniting within him. He glanced around, some coworkers stifled laughter while others looked uncomfortable, unsure of how to react. His friend Mike, sitting nearby, shot him a concerned look. "Ethan, are you okay?" he asked, his brow furrowing. Ethan's jaw tightened as he pushed off the bar, adrenaline surging through him. "No, I'm not okay," he muttered under his breath, storming toward Chris. "Is that what you think of our success, Chris?" Ethan's voice cut through the noise, steady and cold. Chris, momentarily startled, blinked up at him, his expression shifting from surprise to a drunken smirk. "What's the matter, Ethan? You can't take a joke, not when it's about my wife." Ethan shot back, fists clenched at his sides. "You think you can just say whatever you want without consequences? Hey, lighten up." "It's just a bit of fun," Chris slurred, waving his hand dismissively. "Laura's hot. Can you blame me?" Ethan felt his blood boil, the world narrowing down to just Chris and the affront against everything he held dear. "You're crossing a line, Chris," he hissed, stepping closer. Before he could second-guess himself, he swung his fist, the impact resonating through his arm as it connected with Chris's jaw. Chris stumbled back, shock painting his face, and the bar fell silent, eyes shifting toward the chaos. "Don't you ever talk about my wife like that again," Ethan spat, his heart racing. He could feel the stares, the weight of their judgment, but in that moment, he didn't care. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the bar, the cool night air hitting him like a breath of fresh freedom. Outside, Ethan leaned against the cool brick wall, trying to catch his breath, his mind racing. What just happened, he whispered to himself, grappling with a mix of anger and disbelief. He knew he had to tell someone. Pulling out his phone, he dialed Mark, his best friend. "Mark, I need you," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "On my way, man." "What happened?" Mark's tone was instantly serious. "Just meet me at the diner," Ethan replied, already pacing the sidewalk, replaying the confrontation in his head. The anger he felt was palpable, but so was the dread of what lay ahead. The diner was a small, unassuming place with flickering neon lights and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. Ethan slid into a booth near the window, nervously tapping his fingers against the table. The events of the night replayed in his mind like a bad dream. He couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that clung to him, heavy and suffocating. Moments later, Mark pushed through the door, his tall frame silhouetted against the harsh lights outside. He spotted Ethan and made his way over, concern etched on his face. "Ethan, what's going on?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from him. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "I overheard Chris talking about Laura last night. He was saying he wanted to sleep with her, Mark. I didn't know how to react, so I punched him." Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. "You did what?" "That's insane." "I know," Ethan replied, running a hand through his hair. "But I couldn't just stand there and let him talk about her like that. I mean, what kind of man does that?" Mark leaned back, folding his arms as he processed the information. "This isn't just about the punch, though. What's going to happen now? Are you going to confront Laura?" Ethan sighed, glancing out the window at the passing cars. "I have to. But I don't even know how to bring it up. What if she denies it? What if she—" "Ethan, listen," Mark interrupted, his tone firm. "You need to have proof before you confront her. Otherwise, it'll just be your word against hers. And if there is something going on, you need to be prepared to handle it." Ethan nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. "You're right. I just can't believe this is happening. I thought we had a good marriage." Mark leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You know Laura better than anyone. If there's something going on, it's not just Chris making a stupid joke. Trust your gut." The waitress approached their table, breaking the tension. "What can I get you guys?" she asked with a friendly smile, pen poised over her notepad. Ethan forced a smile, trying to shake off the heaviness. "Just coffee for now, thanks," he said, while Mark ordered a burger. As the waitress walked away, Ethan turned back to Mark, his heart heavy. "I need to find a way to get evidence. I'll check her phone or something. I just can't believe I'm even considering this." Mark shook his head, a serious look on his face. "Just be careful, Ethan. You don't want to cross any lines that could come back to bite you." "I know. I feel like I'm losing control of everything," Ethan admitted, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Take a step back," Mark advised, his voice steady. "You've got a plan now. Gather your evidence, confront Laura, and if it comes down to it, you can confront Chris again. You can't let him get away with this." Ethan took a deep breath, nodding in agreement. "You're right. I need to focus on what's next." As the waitress returned with their drinks, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up to see a message from Laura. "Hey, how's the celebration? Can't wait to hear all about it." His stomach twisted. Could she really be that oblivious? "I can't keep doing this," he muttered, staring at the screen. Mark watched him intently. "You have to be honest with her, Ethan. No matter how hard it is. You owe it to yourself." Ethan met Mark's gaze, feeling a surge of determination. "I will. I'll figure this out. I'm not going to let them get away with it." With newfound resolve, he pushed the phone into his pocket, ready to face the inevitable confrontation that lay ahead. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a soft glow over the cluttered table where Ethan sat, nursing a cup of coffee. Despite the warmth of the light, a chill settled deep within him. He had spent the night tossing and turning, his mind racing with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and the looming confrontation with Laura. Today was the day. He had to confront her. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "I can do this," he whispered to himself. Just as he mentally prepared for the conversation, he heard the familiar sound of the front door opening. "Ethan?" Laura called, her voice light and cheerful. "I'm home." Ethan felt his stomach twist at the sound of her voice. He stood up, moving to the living room to greet her. She walked in, her face brightened by a smile, a contrast to the storm brewing inside him. "Hey. How was your night?" she asked, setting her bag down and leaning in to kiss him. He returned the kiss but felt a tension simmering beneath the surface. "Can we talk?" Ethan replied, his tone serious. Laura's smile faltered, and her brow creased with concern. "Sure, what's wrong? You look a bit pale." He led her to the kitchen, gesturing for her to sit at the table. He took a moment, gathering his thoughts as he watched her, a sense of normalcy in her demeanor that only fueled his anxiety. Last night at the bar, he started, but the words caught in his throat. I overheard something. Chris was saying he wants to sleep with you. Laura's eyes widened in shock. What? That's ridiculous. He was probably just drunk and joking around. Ethan felt the heat rise in his chest. Joking around? He said it outright, Laura. How can you brush this off? Ethan, you know how Chris is when he drinks. He's always been a clown. She crossed her arms defensively, her voice rising slightly. You can't take everything he says seriously. No, he replied, leaning in closer, his voice intense. But you have to understand this isn't just about a joke. It's about respect, our marriage, and what he thinks he can get away with. Are you going to deny there's something wrong with this? Ethan, you're overreacting, she said, her tone sharp. It's just Chris being Chris. I can handle it, can you? He shot back, his frustration boiling over. Can you really handle it? Because it seems to me like you're not even acknowledging how serious this is. I mean, if he feels comfortable saying things like that, what else is he saying behind my back? Laura's expression hardened. Are you really accusing me of something? I can't believe you're putting me in this position. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking you to be honest with me. I deserve that, don't I? His voice softened, the desperation seeping in. Ethan, I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you, she said, her voice faltering slightly. But the defensive wall she had built was still firmly in place. Then why don't you want to talk about it? Why are you getting defensive? He pressed, his heart racing. I need to know the truth, Laura. If there's nothing going on, then why are you protecting him? I'm not protecting him, she exclaimed, her hands clenched into fists. I'm just trying to keep things calm. You're making this worse. Worse? Ethan repeated incredulously, standing up. You think I'm making this worse? You're the one who won't face the reality of this situation. You're defending a man who thinks he can toy with my life. Laura stood up, the tension palpable between them. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Ethan. I don't know what else to say. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the confrontation settle heavily on his shoulders. I need proof. I need to know for certain what's going on. If you can't be honest with me, then I'll have to find out for myself. Are you threatening me? Laura's voice dropped, her expression now a mixture of anger and hurt. I'm not threatening you, he replied, frustration lacing his tone. But if you're hiding something, I have to protect myself. I'm going to dig deeper, and I won't stop until I know the truth. Ethan, please, she started, her voice softening, but he held up a hand to silence her. No, Laura. It's too late for that. You can't just sweep this under the rug. If there's nothing to hide, then we'll get through this. But if you are involved with Chris, he couldn't finish the thought, the fear of that possibility chilling him to the bone. Laura's gaze faltered, the fight seemingly draining from her. You're really going to go down this path? I have to, Ethan replied, his voice steady but his heart racing. I can't live in the dark anymore. I'll find out what I need to know. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Laura standing in the kitchen, the silence stretching between them like an unbridgeable chasm. The confrontation had shattered the illusion of their life together, and Ethan knew there was no turning back. He felt the weight of what was to come settle heavily on his shoulders, a storm of uncertainty looming just ahead. The day of the company gala dawned bright and clear, but for Ethan, the sun felt too harsh against the backdrop of his turmoil. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, he could barely recognize the man staring back at him. Gone was the confident employee, in his place was a man on the brink of exposing everything he had held dear. Arriving at the venue, a lavish ballroom filled with shimmering chandeliers and elegantly dressed colleagues, Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The music played softly in the background, laughter ringing out, but all he could hear was the pounding of his heart as he spotted Chris across the room. Ethan. You made it. Chris exclaimed, his voice loud and boisterous, as he sauntered over, a drink in hand. The flush of alcohol colored his cheeks, and the arrogant grin on his face made Ethan's blood boil. "Yeah, wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied coolly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Chris leaned closer, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "You should lighten up. It's a celebration. And hey, have you seen Laura? She looked stunning tonight. Almost as stunning as—" "Don't," Ethan interrupted, his voice low but firm. "Just don't. I know what you said about her." Chris feigned innocence, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, it was just a joke, man. No harm meant, no harm." Ethan shot back, feeling the weight of his anger build. "You've crossed a line, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." "Relax, Ethan. It's not like she'd ever go for a guy like me," Chris laughed, dismissing Ethan's anger as a joke. Ethan took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to lash out again. "You think this is funny? I'm not going to let you ruin my marriage and my career with your twisted jokes." Just then, the event planner stepped up to the stage, microphone in hand, and called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. We have some exciting presentations ahead." Ethan knew this was his moment. He had prepared meticulously for this, collecting evidence against Chris's corporate misdeeds and the betrayal he felt from Laura. He stepped forward, heart pounding in his chest. "Excuse me," Ethan called out, his voice cutting through the chatter, causing heads to turn. "I have something important to say." The room fell silent, eyes wide with curiosity as Ethan made his way to the stage. Chris's expression shifted from amusement to concern. "What are you doing, Ethan?" he hissed, but Ethan ignored him, focusing on the audience. "Last week, I overheard something that should never be said in a professional environment," Ethan began, his voice steady. "Chris here thought it was acceptable to make crude comments about my wife, Laura. I've kept quiet about it, thinking it would blow over, but this is more than just words. It's about respect, integrity, and the values we hold as a company." Gasps filled the room, and Chris's face paled. "Ethan, you can't do this," he pleaded, his bravado evaporating. "Oh, but I can," Ethan replied, pulling out his phone and displaying the messages he had collected. "And it's not just about what he said. I've also uncovered serious corporate misconduct that affects us all." He swiped through the evidence, revealing incriminating emails and documents, each one punctuating the weight of his accusations. "Chris has been exploiting company resources for personal gain, and this is a breach of trust that cannot go unpunished." Whispers spread through the crowd, some colleagues nodding in agreement, others looking shocked. Chris's attempts at denial fell flat against the mounting evidence. "Ethan, come on, we can talk about this," Chris urged, desperation creeping into his voice. "Talk. This isn't a conversation anymore. It's a reckoning," Ethan replied, his heart racing as he faced the crowd. "We deserve transparency and honesty in our workplace, and this is just the beginning." Then, he turned to Laura, who stood at the back of the room, her face pale and her expression a mixture of anger and shame. "And Laura, if you think you can continue to play both sides, you're wrong. I deserve better than this." The tension in the room shifted as Laura stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Ethan, please, it wasn't like that. Chris is just a friend." "Just a friend?" Ethan echoed incredulously. "You're defending him after everything? I can't believe this." Tears welled in Laura's eyes as she glanced around at the watching crowd. "I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe me." "No, Laura," Ethan said, his heart breaking at the sight of her distress. "It's too late for that. I trusted you, and you let me down." As the gravity of the situation sunk in, Chris's bravado crumbled, revealing a man cornered and exposed. "This isn't fair, Ethan. You're ruining me," he shouted, panic evident in his voice. "Maybe it's time you learned that actions have consequences," Ethan replied, finally feeling a sense of liberation wash over him. The audience buzzed with energy, some applauding his courage while others whispered amongst themselves in disbelief. As the night wore on, Ethan's heart raced with a mix of relief and uncertainty. He had taken the first steps to reclaim his life and his dignity. In the aftermath, he could see the path ahead, lined with challenges but also with the potential for a fresh start. Weeks later, as he finalized the divorce, a sense of closure enveloped him. He had faced his demons, exposed the truth, and emerged stronger. With each signature on the divorce papers, he felt the shackles of betrayal fall away, making room for new beginnings. Stepping out of the attorney's office, he took a deep breath, looking forward to a future where he could rediscover himself, free from the shadows of deceit.